Showing up to work takes courage. We don't talk about that enough. Sometimes, to survive in certain environments, we actually become chameleons. We feel the need to adjust, we shapeshift to fit in, we tone ourselves down. And over time, many of us numb out just to get through the day. Some people numb with substances, others numb by disconnecting from their own bodies. But today, we talk about something different. We talk about the skill of disconnecting when necessary, and more importantly, how to reconnect with yourself in the work you do. Let's roll right in. All right. Welcome to the Work Sucks, But I Like It podcast. Today we've got Mary Eldridge. She's a licensed therapist turned coach who guides high achieving women who blame themselves in toxic workplaces. As some describe her, she's a disruptor of harm. Mary, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Tony. I'm so happy to be here. And thank you so much, everybody, for listening.
No, awesome. So, Mary, first question we always ask our guests here is how do you define work?
Gosh, something that you don't want to do, maybe?
Nice. There's some honesty. I love it.
Ah, I do have to say, though, I do love the work that I do, right? But yeah, work is work, right? It is still something that you have to show up in a certain way, sometimes not 1,000% authentically, right? Because you have to meet certain expectations and then you're having to navigate what other people think and all of that. So, yeah.
All right, awesome. Definitely a lot to unpack there, Mary. So, how do you apply this definition to what you do every day?
Yeah. Well, the way I apply it is that I use that to also support women in identifying, what parts of their work are feeling harmful as well, right? Is it that you're not able to show up as yourself, right? Because you're questioning if your supervisor likes you or not, if you're going to keep your job or not, or if you're having to I like to think about it as kinda like chameleon style, right? And kinda like shape shift into, what is expected of you in certain settings, right? And how that changes across the board sometimes, even within the same organization. So yeah, that's primarily how I use it. I also am very validating in terms of, yeah, work is a responsibility and sometimes we don't want to do it, but we still do it because we gotta have to.
So, that's great, Mary. So, one thing I'm just going to jump right into this kind of topic here because you're here and I think you're a great candidate to talk about this sexism in the workplace, right? Can you talk to us about women in, I'll call a male dominated workplace culture? What is your perspective on that? How do women show up authentically in that arena?
Yeah, I think it takes a lot of courage. First of all, right? And I always say courage is not the absence of fear either, right? Sometimes we have to do the difficult thing, and we do it scared. Right. And that is still okay. Right. But when it comes to sexism and all of the isms, sometimes that forces us to leave kinda like a piece of us, aside to be able to survive in that environment, and that actually puts us into survival mode, right? So, I think that not only we struggle sometimes to even achieve our own expectations, even achieve our own goals in those settings because of those external forces and biases, right? But also because when we're put into survival mode, we can't really access rational thinking to our fullest, right? So that makes it really difficult and complex when it comes to being productive, being the person that you want to be at work, and also being able to like be your full self and show up with all of your talents and like as a brilliant person. So yeah.
No, I love that. So one of the things we talk about, Mary, in the show is that success is not a matter of good luck, it's good skills. So you mentioned in your definition of work here that we show up in a certain way, but we're not always our authentic self. How do we develop the skill of being authentic and I guess playing this role in the workplace? Like how do we like play the game, if you will?
It's a lot of like nervous system regulation, right? So I do believe that confidence isn't something that you like have or don't, right? It is about actually feeling regulated in your system to actually be able to speak up in the way that you want to and show up in the way that you want to. And that is like authentic to you, right? So I do like teach a lot of that to my clients. You know, how can you like regulate yourself in that setting that may actually be totally public, maybe in the middle of a meeting, right? And like, okay, so is it like planting your feet on the ground? Is it, like lowering your shoulders, like taking a longer exhale than your inhale? All of that, right? As a way of telling our brain it is okay for me to be myself, right? And it is okay for me to say the things that I have to say and that I want to say.
No, I love that. So the skill sounds like just being aware in the moment to kind of like settle yourself, right? So kind of saying like set the
Mhm,
feet on the
mhm.
ground. And I guess how do we catch ourselves in those moments, right? The meetings can be tough. There could be yelling and screaming and things. How do we become more aware of, oh crap, I need to take a, deep breath here or something like that?
I think that also requires skill because one thing that we don't tend to consider is how sometimes to survive in those settings, we also have to numb and disconnect from our bodies, right? So what happens is that, like, for us to even being able to notice the discomfort that we're already experiencing, because the discomfort is going to be there, whether we feel it or not, right? But for us to notice it, we also have to tell our brain that it is okay to come back to our bodies, right? So it does require a lot of like trauma, healing, moving out of survival mode, even if you are still in survival mode in other ways, right? But yeah, it is also, again, nervous system regulation and also healthy boundaries too.
So you mentioned an interesting word like numb and disconnect. Can you
hmm
bring more, like, what do you mean by that?
We numb as a way of not feeling the pain, whether that is like physical pain, emotional pain, all of that. A lot of people use it or do it through substances, right? That is kind of like the easy way of doing that, like whether it is alcohol, or like other substances, right? We disconnect from our bodies, right? However, there are other ways, right? So, folks that have experienced trauma, they also go into kind of like the realm of dissociation. So, it's kind of like a separation between brain and body, right? And that is also to be able to survive in your own body when you're experiencing a lot of pain, right? We talk a lot about, oh, I'm on autopilot kind of thing. That is a form of dissociation. That is like us disconnecting from our bodies as a way of, just um, uh, saving some capacity, to be able to like handle other things and stuff like that. So, yeah, that is part of that numbing piece.
So when you mean autopilot, so I think of the have you heard of the word flow? Like the concept of being in a flow state, like in the zone?
Yes, yes, yes.
Perfect. So can you differentiate for us
Mhm.
what you mean by autopilot versus being in a flow state with people?
Yeah. I think that being on autopilot, it's more kind of like you take the same route home every day, so you know exactly what to do, right? And you don't even have to think about it. You can just like be processing everything that happened at work on your commute kind of thing, or what else you need to do when you get home and all of that. That is kind of like that autopilot, right? Then in the flow, right? I would say it's more kinda like embodying things, right? So it's kinda like the complete opposite, I would say. It's when you feel, like, really good and you're, like, so focused and oriented that all of your attention is going into what you're doing, right? And you're gonna be, like, super productive, super effective, so all those things. So it's more kinda like embodying all of that.
One thing I guess I'd like to, well, I've experienced unfortunately is like women in the workplace. Again, there's this sort of sexist thing in a male dominated workplace culture. We're talking about the skill of like, again, having the courage to speak up. I guess like walk us through the mindset for what women need to do to really stand in the workplace culture today? Like how to do efficient work, to not be an autopilot, to be in these flow states, to I guess I don't wanna say hang with the boys, but that's kinda like is that what you're saying when you kinda mentioned, the thing about work is sometimes we have to step outside of ourselves, like, we're not faking it, but we're trying to fit in? I guess I'm trying to, like you see where I'm kinda going with that? Like perfect. I'll let you roll.
Yeah. So I am a fan of Brené Brown. Brené Brown, she is a social worker that does a lot of research. She talks about fitting in as this idea of I want to be here, but you don't care if I am or not, kind of thing, right? So I don't belong here, right? Belonging is the complete opposite, right? Because it's like I want to be here and you all care about me being here and want me here, kind of thing. And belonging is actually a basic human need. When we don't have that, that puts us into survival mode too. So I think that one of the main strategies, or maybe two, I would say, when it comes to being in those male dominated spaces that you don't feel like you fit in, you don't feel like you belong, and you feel like you're just having to flounder through sometimes, right? I would say it's definitely nervous system regulation and also boundaries, right? So, mental boundaries, emotional boundaries, physical boundaries, so that right, that you can create some separation between what is happening outside of you and what you believe about yourself and what you believe like you deserve too. So, yeah.
Is there a certain point in people's, like, working with clients where they're just in such a toxic workplace culture that they have to leave, right? These skills that you're teaching them, this mindset. Where is that threshold where you say, "This place sucks, like, you need to leave?"
Yeah. Oh, and 100%. Yes. Honestly, I am a very, because I have over a decade of doing trauma work, I am a very empowering provider, right? I'm very trauma informed. This is a collaboration, but you still get to make all the decisions, right? So I would say I would trust what they feel. I also encourage people to like follow their instinct, right? I believe that our instinct is not just like, oh, a gut reaction kind of thing. Oh, I just have a feeling kind of thing. No, it's actually our brain picking up on cues of safety and lack thereof, right? That tells us this is something we have to consider, and this is something we have to pursue. This is something we have to do, kind of thing. And there's that concept, we talk about as neuroception. And it's kind of like we combine all of our senses, right? Include in like the information from our senses and our bodies and everything that's happening, right, as a way of staying safe. So I always encourage my clients to follow their instinct, trust their instinct, because also in society we are told don't, right? That kind of like the baseline, and to disregard our own feelings and how we feel about things, right?
So what happens with the client when, I love how you're talking about with the gut instinct, right? And to trust that.
Yeah.
What happens when the paycheck is too good and the commute's that perfect commute, 20 minutes, no traffic? Like, how does the employee then navigate a crappy workplace?
So it's funny that you actually mentioned this because I was talking to someone about it earlier. I always ask my clients, are you wanting to leave because you're trying to escape and things are feeling too bad in this very moment that you just feel like you need to get out, right? Or are you trying to leave because you're actually recognizing that you have outgrown that space, that there's no opportunity for you? And, I think that's actually where I was trying to go with the neuroception thing, right? Like, is there room for them to actually accept you with your new boundaries? Right? Is there room for you to like be able to show up in a different way? Right? And if there isn't, then that's very telling about, you know, what you can continue to pursue in that space or not, right? And that's still not kind of like very cut and dry. You have to leave because the person gets to decide that, right? But I would say, if there isn't room for growth, if there isn't room for you to set up new boundaries, maybe the opportunities there are very limited.
No, I love that with how you potentially outgrown that space. So typically when a person leaves a job, right, it's either or wants to quit, it's either because of the job, the workplace culture, or their boss. From what you've seen, Mary, what is your take on those three things? Like, do you see more of one than the other today? What are your thoughts with that?
Gosh, I think they're so like interconnected, honestly. One thing that I am the work that I do, I see a lot is more kind of like the dynamics with like peers and others, right? Kind of like at the same level of the hierarchy. A lot of like workplace mobbing, a lot of like exclusion, a lot of gaslighting, stuff like that. But how that's mixed up with also management is that I do see a lot of managers that really don't do anything to fix the dynamics, right? They, are kind of like those, like invisible managers kind of thing. They're there, but they aren't really, right? They aren't really doing anything meaningful to actually create a workplace that is, empowering, that embraces people, that where people feel like they can, belong to. Yeah, that's why I say that it's kind of like mixed up and just, very interconnected because the manager is the one that has the power to also change a lot of the things, right? And if you aren't doing it, then yeah, that's a problem.
Man, this is great, Mary, because I'm just chuckling because I've seen this time and time again, right? With managers not doing manager things, right? So what are your thoughts with getting the manager to see themselves or what do they need to change? Like that's tough sometimes, right? How do you like
Right.
disrupt that, if you will, with your language here, the harm that the managers are doing?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I don't think necessarily those managers are seeking out support as much, right? Because
Fair
they're
enough. Valid.
so numb.
Right.
They're so numb and like they are so in their own like world that they can't see beyond their own experience. Sometimes, it's like really good people, um, uh, but they don't have the skills. Right. Because one thing that we see a lot is, kind of like the worker that has been there the longest is the one that gets promoted, kind of thing, right? So they really don't have the leadership skills to address the culture issues at work, right? So that's one issue. Another one is that the manager is so checked out that they don't even care. Right? They're just there, because of their paycheck as well, kind of thing. So they're not going to get into additional conflict just, to make it easier for other people, kind of thing. Right. And we have the ones that are like flat out just bad, like terrible people, of course.
Yeah.
Right. So,
They hate their
um, uh,
lives. Yeah.
yeah. So when it comes to like all three of those, you're not necessarily seeking as much support or help and changing their ways.
So with the managers, Mary, the clients, the decade you've been working, what generational differences do you see in the workplace? Let's start with just like the managers, I guess. What have you seen sort of trends over the years, people you've worked with? What are your thoughts with why I guess they're poor managers? Start with that.
I think that, we definitely are moving into like that space of um, um embracing people a little more. I'm not saying completely, right? As people, not just workers, right? And kind of like recognizing that you're a human doing the work as opposed to just a worker, right? And that we cannot separate work and personal life completely. Ultimately, they're going to be mixed up, they're going to be interconnected, they're going to impact both spaces or each other. So I think that luckily we're moving a little more towards that. Um, um, I do see a lot of managers that also like have really good intentions. Granted, good intentions don't necessarily mean also positive impact, right? But I think it is like at least to start off. So yeah, but I mean, we will still have some horrible managers too.
Yeah, there's something that I remember reading years back, man. I think it's the Peter's principle, where people rise to the level of their incompetence. I don't know if you ever heard of that. So if you come in as an engineer, you're a great engineer. People see you, oh, you're a great engineer. We're going to promote you and be a manager. Well, now they suck as a manager because they're using the engineering skills to be like the manager, right? So it's just like, so no,
I
it's
love
very
that.
interesting.
Exactly. You're a working bee kind of thing. Let's promote you. Well, but do they have the skills? Are you supporting them and gaining the skills too? Or you just want them to just fill up the role?
Right. And unfortunately, sometimes, the people that get these roles are the ones that speak the loudest, right? And the people
Yeah.
that should be getting these roles that have the most potential don't, right? So with your
Mhm.
clients, how do you help? Have you had a situation? I know you can't disclose personal details of things, but if you had a situation where you've built up a client's confidence where they could get that promotion, could you like walk us through that kind of an example, what you did to help get this person that promotion, navigating all these things that suck?
Well, definitely those boundaries. The boundaries work is critical. And I actually, I've had some people can't yeah, as you know, can't disclose a ton, but someone said to me, I felt like a part of me was slowly dying at that place. All right. And after the work that we did, this person said, I feel alive again. I feel like there's finally meaning and purpose in what I'm doing. And like, I can finally love what I'm doing again. Right. Because the reality is that, you know, a lot of this like brilliant women in toxic environments, they still have worked really hard to get there, whether it is like through college or like at that place of employment, right? They have worked really hard, and then to just live a life that is unfulfilled, or live a life where and this is kind of like a theme as well. Like things that I hear, like I don't know how I'll make it to retirement kind of thing, right? Whether they have, a year or two until retirement or they have decades, right? I hear that as well quite a bit.
So I'm
So
curious, Mary, with your example, and again, I know we have to watch what we disclose here, but very curious how you took this client from slowly dying, if you will, on the inside to now finding meaning and purpose. What was that transformation? Where was that aha moment? The work that you guys did to like, oh wow, I do have purpose. Can you walk us through that?
so it was a lot of work on self-worth. The I am enough. I am doing enough, which, I am enough is very different from I am doing enough. But sometimes, like, of course, they kind of like get mixed up as well, where we feel like I am not doing enough, meaning that I am not enough kind of thing. So it was a lot of like self worth work, a lot of like self regulation, a lot of kind of like owning their skills as well and recognizing that, that toxicity did not mean anything about them per se. It was an external factor playing a role and definitely impacting them, right? But it didn't define them.
No, that's excellent. So, Mary, what would you say is the most frustrating thing about your work today? As a therapist, as a coach, what is the most frustrating thing for you today?
I would say the stuff that people put other people through, honestly. That is just heartbreaking to see, right? And, you know, yes, it is what keeps me in business, right? But also, like, I wish, people didn't have to go through that stuff, right? I wish they didn't have to carry the impact of everything that they have gone through, the impact of trauma. And one thing about trauma is that trauma changes the way you see yourself the way you see the world, and the way you see yourself within the world and kind of like your place in the world, right? So, um, uh, the work that has to happen after trauma, is pretty deep. And I think that sometimes those harmful workplaces, harmful coworkers, toxic managers don't necessarily realize the deep impact that they are leaving on someone.
Mm. So tell us, Mary, about your work with the Mind to Thrive. How you're making this not suck for people, I guess is what you're saying, which I love. So tell us about your Mind to Thrive work that you do.
So I actually have a program. It is called the Toxic Job Recovery Accelerator. It is a 12-week program, and it's like a pre-recorded course with also the weekly coaching sessions. I do incorporate also some EMDR, which EMDR stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It is a form of trauma therapy that has been really well researched and studied and executed. So I incorporate some of that as well to kind of, not so much. In the coaching world, I don't do so much kind of like the therapy pieces, right? But we use it as a way of kind of like expediting the growth and the change, whether it is like, overcoming some limiting beliefs and stuff like that.
Now that's amazing. So, Mary, I'm very curious when I was kind of researching you, before this episode here. What are your thoughts on the differences between a therapist and a coach? I find it very interesting that you went from therapy to want to coach. So, what was the missing sort of link or factor or characteristic in therapy that made you say, I want to be a coach? And what are the differences? I'm very curious.
So to me, they are both sides of the same coin, right? Like the therapy piece, I like to think about it as like we go into like the everything and anything kind of thing, right? We dive deep into like what's bringing you in, the root causes of all these things, and honestly, it can take much longer to actually achieve change because one of the pieces about therapy is that at least in my case as a therapist, a trauma informed therapist, is that yes, sure, we set our goals, but we also allow for whatever crisis that showed up to be processed in that space, whether it
Mm.
is aligned with the goals or not. Right. So, that is like the therapy piece. And it's primarily individual, right? So, one on one sessions, right? Which are great. And sometimes, like, what the person needs, right? Especially if there is medical necessity for that, right? But um, um, your reach is fairly limited then, right? So with the coaching piece, we're mostly focused on it's like future oriented, getting you to gain all the skills to reach your goals, right? So it's very like laser focused, honing in on reaching your goals and getting you there as fast as possible, right? So that's a pretty significant difference from what therapy is. And don't get me wrong, I love them both, right? But there are different approaches to getting to the same result, right? And one may take you longer, the other one may be shorter, right? But with the coaching piece, you're not necessarily exploring all the things. Like I said, you're laser focused on that goal, right? And there is no medical necessity. So people are doing well and want to thrive, or they are struggling, but not to the point of like, gosh, I, this is impacting my whole life and I cannot function kind of thing. That would be more kind of like the therapy setting to process all that. So.
So that's a great distinction between the two. Mary, if listeners of the show want to learn more about your coaching or therapy, where's a good place for them to land?
Well, they can find me on Instagram very easily at your BIPOC therapist. Or they can also find me on Facebook or they can visit my website. So on Facebook, I show up as Mary Eldridge, LCSW. And also my website is www.mindtothrive.com.
Awesome. Mary, it's been a pleasure having you on the show. Thank you so much.
Same, Tony. Thank you so much for having me. And thank you so much, everybody, for listening.
Mary and I dive into sexism in the workplace. We talk about those subtle and not too subtle signals that make you question your worth. We explored how society often teaches us not to trust our own feelings, not to even consider our own instincts, and how that's really dangerous because there's a difference between I'm not doing enough and I am not enough. And she indicates that we get the two mixed up all the time. The workplace culture has to evolve today. We keep hearing this theme over and over again in almost every episode that I've been doing of late. And really, individuals need to learn how to regulate themselves instead of constantly overriding these instincts, their own instincts. And I love how she reframed confidence. It's not something you either have or don't have. It's not a personality trait, it's a regulation skill. Can you stay grounded when things feel unsafe? Can you reconnect to your body when you've numbed out? Can you tell yourself it's okay to be you, even when the environment doesn't fully reflect that back? Remember, success is not good luck, it's good skills. Today, the skill is tapping into the self regulation. You have heard now in previous episodes how I've begun asking how we can measure this internal work. This self awareness and regulation is a skill we all need to develop today. From journaling to simple breathing, check in with yourself by asking the question, am I not doing enough? Or I am not enough? Write it down, check in internally, converse with a friend. It's not about survival of the fittest today. It's really about showing fully up in the jungle of work today. Thanks for listening. I'll see you next time.